Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we would like to invite a representative of Paraguay to make use of the floor. He's not here, so I am going to invite a representative from Peru.
Señora Ministra Cornejo.
Madam Minister Cornejo, Ms. Margarita Wallström, Special Representative of the UN. Peru, due to its geographic location and morphological characteristic of its territory, together with social and cultural diversity, presents different scenarios of a multi-threat risk and disasters which are very dynamic and complex, which are basically putting at risk the development of the country, and also we are risking loss of life and of livelihoods. Peru has already set its path towards development with a focus on disaster risk management. Or national policy for disaster risk management is mandatory, and the recently approved National Plan of Disaster Risks represents an important legal and regulatory framework to include disaster risk management within the development process of the country. In this context, disaster risk management is understood as a social process, and its aim is prevention, reduction of vulnerabilities, and the permanent control of disaster risk factors in society, as well as the suitable preparation and response when facing emergencies and/or disasters. It is important to point out that we have been developing at the national, regional, and local level technical regulatory instruments and tools to comply with the national risk management policy, building institutionality through capacities and competences needed for a suitable implementation of the National Disaster Risk Management Plan. Within the process of implementation of the National Risk Management System, we made substantial progress in putting together work groups for disaster risk management at the 3 levels of government, covering approximately 80% of the institutions of the state. This situation has generated the beginning of a process of establishing and enforcing norms and existing mechanisms in order to link disaster risk management within the development policies for the development of the state. Through the law of population resettlement for areas of very high risk that cannot be mitigated, Peru has already established technical, administrative, operational steps, as well as the key activities that will guide the responsible institutions in order to implement resettlement of populations and/or families located in high-risk areas. However, all of these plans face challenges. In spite of all the progress, there are still many challenges that remain and that need to be tackled. Amongst them, we must make progress on the approval and implementation of a policy to develop capacities in public administration that will help the institutionality of the different levels of the national and subnational and local governments with the capacities and competences and skills that will allow them to carry out the due execution of the contents and processes for risk management. Constant and growing development of scientific and technological research is also important. It must be promoted with greater participation of universities and technical institutes. Likewise, we must achieve the linkage, coordination, and collaboration with all of the systems with all of the actors of the national risk management system. Regarding risk management and climate change, for Peru, it is very clear the very close relationship that exists between the factors and processes that generate disaster risks and climate change. Its effects have an incidence on the dynamic magnitude and frequency of the impacts and phenomena generated by disasters. This obvious relationship makes obvious the needs to articulate strategies and actions focused on risk reduction. COP20 this year will be carried out in Peru, in the city of Lima, and it is an opportunity to place in the agenda the issue of education on climate change in our countries. Regarding recommendations, the main recommendations of Peru is to promote the interaction between disaster risk management and climate change. The access of a new framework should be focused more on the organizational community and not so much on governments. We have to promote governance, strengthening the legal frameworks that will set priorities of responsibilities and accountabilities. Finally, we wish to express our gratitude to the people and government of the Republic of Ecuador, especially the Secretariat for Risk Management and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ecuador for their generous hospitality. And we would like to congratulate the organization of this fourth meeting of the regional platform. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I would like to invite now the representative from the Dominican Republic.
Buenas tardes. Ready. Good afternoon. In representation of the Dominican Republic, I hereby thank the Ecuador of Ecuador on behalf, as represented by the minister, and we also thank the United Nations um, represented here by Margarita and the people of Guayaquil for their kind uh, hosting of this event, and the people here who have helped this attending and caring for us these days. And from the Bihogo framework meeting we made since then, important measures in our country. We assessed the national system, and then we had a diagnose, and then that allowed us to have an early warning system and with meteorological methods, and we are working on tsunami alert systems. And we also have a national plan for risks and an emergency plan as well, and we updated with the communities all legislations related to risk management, and the community networks also were structured with the aid of the Red Cross, the Dominican Republic Red Cross, and we strengthened the operations, the Emergency Operations Center, and we created one system of information. We also disseminated the plan of action in the different schools. We also created groups, rescue groups for remote areas with cooperation of Argentina, Brazil, and the South Command of the U.S., and we also created a guideline for vulnerable populations in cases of earthquakes, and we also worked on with hospitals and schools in the improvement of infrastructures. We included, as well as a fourth axis of the National Strategic Plan for Development, everything having to do with the risk disaster management. And we also included some new platforms for managing the managing disaster risks. We have also improved the mechanisms in the Caribbean region and the national emergency funds, and we've created new units for managing risks and at the local regional levels. At the social security hospitals, we have allocated more funding for better care. And we also have, with the aid of PAHO and World Health Organization and the Autonomous University of Santo Domingo, we have made joint efforts and best practices in everything, and humanitarian aid and risk management has been put into place and we have helped Haiti. Their disasters in Dominican Republic was able to channel all of the international humanitarian aid directed to the Haiti, and we have become the greatest humanitarian bridge of the history of mankind. After post 2015, we expect more good practices and knowledge transfer, and both through the South-South countries, cooperation countries, and the North-South. We expect more empowerment to local governments and other community actors in the implementation of the strategy for reducing. Thank you very much, and on behalf of my country.
We'd like to invite the representative of Uruguay uh, for his statement, to make his statement. Madam Representative, Madam Minister, good afternoon. Awareness on emergency and disaster risks was awakened a few years ago in Uruguay. Natural threats in our country are almost exclusively of hydrometeorological nature, and according to historical records, we can say that the incidence of these adverse events has a limited dimension in comparative terms. But this benevolence of nature, that even though is real, was exaggerated by a social imaginary that were using averages and means and not extreme values that have been extremely severe. This way of thinking, of analyzing our surroundings and the risks are changing. Every day the Uruguayans know more about natural and anthropic threats and our vulnerabilities. This progressive awareness has been accompanied by the political decision of the government of undertaking the importance of the risk of emergencies, as well as the importance of development processes and the need to adopt immediate measures to reduce our risk. We have an institute from 1995 on preparedness and response. It was created by Law 18,621 of 2009, which promoted it as an integrated system for risk reduction. The objective of SINAI is to protect people, goods, and the environment from adverse phenomena that could derive in situations of emergency or disaster, generating the conditions for sustainable development. This aspect is pertinent in Uruguay, is relevant. Risk reduction is stating that social and economic development should be sustained on criteria of equality and security acceptable to all through an informed and participative exercise with the citizens. SINA is focused on the actions of the state to combat the risk of emergency and disasters in its different stages. The congressman had to create a space to articulate between the different institutions and civil society. Risk management, including the response of emergencies to disasters in Uruguay, is interinstitutional as a task. SENAE is located in the Presidency of the Republic, and the executive power, it has a technical direction that allows for the national coordination of public policies for risk management, and it facilitates also logistical coordination. At the department level, there are emergency departments that are the responsible entities to formulate within their competences, policies, and strategies locally. The operational stages of the departments are the centers to coordinate emergencies. The decentralization law and citizen participation law created a third level of government for risk management, municipalities. The framework of action of Hyogo was at every time, at all times, a technical reference to create our risk management system in the country. The 5 objectives and their indicators were a fundamental input to put together the strategies of institutional strengthening and public communication. We assessed positively the role of the framework of Hyogo and the coordination role which is carried out by the United Nations Office for the Reduction of Disaster Risk. We would like to state then our conviction that it is necessary to continue strengthening the coordination at the regional and global level to reduce disaster risks and to renew and deepen the commitments undertaken by the countries during the Hyogo conference. It is a great challenge to continue building long-term objectives and indicators of performance that will render our risks visible at every level, public, private, and the citizens together, and to orient in a coordinated manner the efforts to reduce them. Our experience suggests that key concepts that can enrich substantially the agreements established after the Hyogo framework are our responsibility. When societies and governments started realizing that disasters are not natural, even though there is a natural disaster involved, the position towards threats and vulnerabilities are always social constructions, then our national systems for risk reduction were born, because determining those social factors that determine a relationship of risk, a bit independent to the disasters, allowed us to manage it in different stages and with different strategies from an integrated framework. But we must continue making progress, supported in our first findings that we have to continue our development, having identified the collective responsibility of human activities regarding risk. We can think about particular specific responsibilities. We need to make an effort of risk analysis regarding externalities and consider the necessary mechanisms to reduce our risks, and that this must be assumed primarily by those direct responsible for causing them. The mechanisms of negative externalities included the promotion. We have to fight negative externalities, and we have to promote ethical principles. Think of broader governance frameworks that will facilitate accountability at the transnational level. We have to strengthen the mechanisms of particular responsibility or accountability, which allows us to manage them in a more efficient manner, as well as a basic manifestation of social justice. Thank you very much.
Venezuela is recognized. Good afternoon. It is not possible to forget the global processes of environmental, political, and social effects and globalization, and especially the fact that they have affected societies and their territories, and up until now irreversibly have been very pernicious. And this is a tendency, a trend that we see around the world. And so this desperate development of the most vulnerable communities have shown us that we will be witness to greater disasters. And now that we are understanding these trends, we need to recognize how inefficient we have been in becoming corrective instead of prospective, and the advances that the integral management has not been happening, and we are now seeing governments understanding and recognizing the need for a more proactive management, and how the efforts have been only dedicated to responding to contingencies. So we're urging people here, and we understand that for several years now, we need to understand that the experts around the world and the regional researchers, especially those who are part of the Latin American Network for Risk Prevention, which is the NET, which has issued statements and suggested in a metaphorical way, and they are reflecting that it is not possible that when we're faced with risk for a boat means just sinking, and we here have other situations, and we are not doing anything to save the ship. This is a metaphor that we are only putting out first aid kits, which are not enough for a situation of the sort. And so we need to look at how we're going to manage risk in the future. For the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and the Vice Ministry of Risk Management and Civil Protection, the ideas of the net are more than ever current and in effect, and we believe that approaching these themes continues to be absent from all the fora and organizations, international organizations promoting disaster reduction. We believe that it is very important to debate very profoundly the way in which the principles that are governing these initiatives need to be taken into account. It is a moral imperative that we promote a discussion that allows us to transform current structures to reduce disasters that have become, in years' time, more and more bureaucratic and justifying for meetings, declarations, and encounters. In some cases, very unuseful, and while our peoples live one calamity after the next. We currently have a historic challenge to move ahead in reducing disasters and sustainability. This is a step that will launch us into the practical domains to be able to act on reducing risks, and we need to have a sustainability in all efforts, in all of our efforts, whether economic, social, or political. And we need to continue with our efforts that will enable us to develop our capacities to respond to disasters and becoming more resilient and to recover faster from after a disaster or calamity. And we need to maybe discuss whether or not we can commit exclusively to increasing resilience in with the purpose of being present and recover our own roads and our own levels of sustainability. I believe that the challenges are great and that we need to go beyond them and look at the conditions of vulnerability to be able to control them and to prevent the inevitable disasters. And these natural disasters are natural because they are occurring. But every effort in this regard that we may actions that we'll take, as the net suggests, they need to be interconnected. Everybody will have their stakeholders and their responsibilities. In this road, we need to forge ahead, and it is our moral obligation at all government levels and all organizations to promote and consolidate our models in our countries to be efficient and effective in risk management, to be able to manage appropriately and not to be accomplices in disasters. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And now we will continue with the presentations by the intergovernmental organizations. And the first one will be, we will hear from the representative from CAPRADE.
Madam Minister, Ms. Wallström, the representatives of the Andean Committee for Disaster Prevention and Management, CAPRADE, participating in the fourth session of the Regional Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction in the Americas, would like to manifest that CAPRADE, from its creation in 2002, has followed important institutional development, highlighting amongst its main achievements the approval in 2004 of the Andean Strategy for Prevention and Attention to Disasters through Decision 591 of the Andean Council of Foreign Affairs Ministers of the Andean Community as a set of policies and guidelines destined towards achieving risk reduction and a timely response to disasters in the sub-region. Likewise, its later harmonization within the Hyogo Framework of Action approved in 2009 through Decision 713, Andean Strategy for the Prevention and Management or Response to Disasters, having as an objective to contribute to risk disaster and the impact of disasters to help towards the sustainable development of all of the countries of the Andean sub-region through institutional strengthening and the establishment of strategic policies, programs and sub-programs common amongst the countries to exchange experiences and create networks and improve mutual collaboration in situations of disasters. This strategic framework has allowed us to achieve important progress in the implementation of the Hyogo Framework of Action in the countries of the sub-region, which have generated substantial changes in institutional, regulatory, and technical models, creating better possibilities for the work on risk management of these three that have allowed for more effective integration of policies, plans, and development, sustainable development programs and programs for the reduction of poverty, as well as to create methodologies, mechanisms, and instruments geared towards strengthening disaster risk management with an integrated vision, including from a systemic perspective, risk management criteria in all of the processes, giving emphasis to the local and community activities. It is important to mention also the approval of the operational guideline for mutual assistance faced with for disasters of the member countries of the Andean community, having as the objective to create mechanisms that will facilitate and support the existing mechanisms to tackle situations of disasters that require international humanitarian assistance. Even though the progress has been significant, gaining greater awareness of the importance on risk management, disaster risk management policies, it is still necessary to strengthen planning processes and decision-making processes. For this to be considered a priority issue in the agendas of the countries of the Andean sub-region at every level, and be able to reduce our vulnerabilities, reduce the effective impacts on our development achievements and the losses caused by disasters, losses of lives, as well as of social, economic, and environmental goods of the communities and the countries. For what we have mentioned, we consider that the third Global Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction is an opportunity to reaffirm the importance of the strategic objectives of Hyogo and to acknowledge the relevance of the broadest participation of all of the stakeholders linked to this issue. It is important to also work on an integrated tackling of all of the processes related to disaster risk management, highlighting the linkage that should exist between the processes that reduce risk and those that have to do with humanitarian actions, considering their independence. We must point out that CAPRADE undertakes the commitment of promoting and disseminating the fast implementation of the results, so the quick implementation of the results of the third conference on disaster risk reduction, especially regarding the adjustments that we must carry out on the policies for risk reduction in the Andean sub-region and its policy of development, and the integration in the policy of development to be able to achieve a more resilient society for the welfare of our peoples. Thank you very much.